Nick Hamilton Honey. Nick is the Natural Resource and Sustainable Energy Educator for Cornell Cooperative Extension of St. Lawrence County. They are also the Energy Navigator Volunteer Coordinator for the North Country. Nick enjoys working with the community and helping residents of St. Lawrence County and the North Country to get answers for energy and natural resource questions. When they are not helping community members, they enjoy spending time with friends, playing Dungeons and Dragons, cooking, hiking, swimming, gardening, and loving their Tibetan Spaniel named Eli. So please join me in welcoming Nick to the St. Lawrence County Center for History and Culture.
Thank you. So welcome. We are going to talk about ticks through time, ticks and the changing climate of the North Country. And this is just a little, preview of kind of the steps we're going to take through the program today. Talking a little bit about history of ticks and tick-borne disease. We'll learn identification of the ticks that you would find here in St. Lawrence County and one that is in the southern part of New York State. We're going to talk about life cycle a little bit, disease, how to remove ticks, prevention of ticks, control of ticks, and we're going to talk a little bit about climate change. Seems like it's it doesn't line up, but trust me, when we get there, you'll see how that does really line up. Just as a comment on this first slide, that is a black-legged tick, and of course we're going to talk more about that, but that's that picture on the left. And this is actually a trend on the right from 1900 to 2020 about the warming in our region. And again, we're going to get to those. So a little bit about the history. So this document on the left-hand side that you see is the U.S. Department of Agriculture bulletin from 1901. And it contains information from a lot of different years, including a seminal work published by Smith and Kilbourne in 1893. And this is important because this is really the first time that we're scientists figuring out the causes of Texas cattle fever, and that it was this tick bite. The document on the right-hand side is talking about, so this is from 1906, the Journal of American Medical Association, talking about the transmission of Rocky Mountain the transmission of disease by Rocky Mountain wood ticks. So you can see that while we haven't had ticks in the North Country, what seems like very long, ticks in general, right, have been around for quite some time, and science has known this. This is a picture of two gentlemen that are important when we think of specifically Lyme disease. So the picture on the lower left is of Andrew Spielman. And he is from the Harvard School of Public Health. He helped diagnose the first case of human babiosis on Nantucket in 1973. And although there were a handful of cases, human cases worldwide, babiosis was not thought to be established as a human disease then. So it's notable because, and then he said it's Nantucket fever because they thought it was a dog tick, but an investigation led to the pathogen actually being found in white-footed mice. on Nantucket. We're gonna come back to the white-footed mouse. So that's just interesting that in 1973, Dr. Spielman was already figuring this out. And then in 1975, the Connecticut State Department of Health, they received complaints from Polly Murray, who was the first person that was testing positive for a bacteria and had symptoms that were, being diagnosed. Her children had juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. Several people in the area had symptoms that she had. So an officer with the Department of Health actually went out, did some background intelligence gathering, and contacted Alan Steer, who who he had worked with at CDC, and they backtracked this particular set of complaints to a doctor who was in Switzerland. And so they knew that it was a European disease that was showing up in the US. And there were, so in 1976, Steer began testing blood on all of these victims, right? And ran them through the 38 known tick-transmitted diseases, and then also 178 other arthropod diseases, right? And none of them matched. There was no positive. And in 1980, Steer and his colleagues actually began to test antibiotic regimens for what was known then, because it occurred in Lyme, Connecticut, as Lyme disease. We then get in 1982, the gentleman who's on the right here, Wilhelm or Willy Bergdorfer, and he is a Swiss-American scientist who is in the field of medical entomology. And he actually named the spirochete that is the bacteria that is causing Lyme disease. And I have a little plushie here just to give you a like fun kind of look at what this Lyme bacteria, right, looks like. It's a spirochete, so it's a spiral bacteria. So that's our history for Lyme disease in particular, okay? There are other tick-borne diseases. We're going to talk just briefly about those when we get to the disease section. But there are a couple of ticks that we really want to focus on, because they're the ones who are causing problems within our human and pet populations here in St. Lawrence County. And so this is the real big problem in St. Lawrence County, and that is the black-legged tick. It is a misnomer to call it a deer tick. So remember I said it was the white-footed mouse that carried that tick-borne disease, which wound up being Lyme disease. The white-footed mouse is the carrier, is the vector that is carrying that Lyme disease. They also carry other diseases. And then the tick itself is taking a blood meal, and that gets transferred to the tick. The tick then transfers it on to us. This is a black-legged tick. It's also a map on here of where it is located. So it is spreading further west, but you can find it everywhere in New York State. The picture on the right is the 3 stages outside of the egg of ticks. This one right here, pointing to the one the whole way on the left, is the larval stage. So when it hatches from an egg, this is what it looks like. It is very, very tiny. You would not at all see it on you. And the likelihood of it being on you is very, very slim. It is the only stage in which it has 6 legs. So unlike other arthropods with 8 legs, this has a stage in which it has 6 legs. The picture or the image second from the left is the nymph stage of the black-legged tick. And then the 2 on the right are the male is on the left, the female is on the right. So the female's larger. The female also has that 2-tone coloration versus the male tick. I do have, it's not going to help folks that are online, but I do have a couple of kind of like, you know, so you can get an image of size-wise, what those different stages look like. Handed out a dime, and beside the dime is a sesame seed and poppy seeds. And so the poppy seed would be like this nymph stage. That's about the size of a nymph of the black-legged tick. And then that poppy seed is the size of this adult female. Okay, so they're very small. American dog tick. This is not that common, but we still do have it in St. Lawrence County. And this, out of the 2 canine ticks, is the one that you would find more likely. Right? Again, a map of where you find it throughout New York State, and then, you know, across the country in various locations. In this particular image, the nymph is the one the whole way on the right, and then the adult male is in the center, and the adult female is on the left. This is the brown dog tick, or kennel tick. This is found throughout the country. Again, not really all that common in St. Lawrence County. You will find it occasionally, but it's just not all that common in St. Lawrence County. The adult female in this is on the left. The adult male is on the right. And I actually have samples of the brown dog tick and the black-legged ticks. You can go ahead and take that out of it. So that folks can see that. The dog tick that is in the one is actually engorged, so it had taken a blood meal. And you can see the size difference really between those two ticks. So Lone Star tick, we do not have this in St. Lawrence County, but if you're traveling somewhere else in the state, so further south in the state, this is actually a tick that you should be aware of, right? It gets its name because of this star on the back of the adult female. The nymph, if anybody knows water pennies, kind of looks like a really, really small water penny, but they're flatter. The very interesting thing about Lone Star ticks versus black-legged ticks is that black-legged ticks will just sit there and wait until a blood meal comes along, and they do something called questing. So I have a little, you know, plushie of my black-legged tick here. And the questing is they have these hooks on their front legs, and the hooks are kind of like Velcro, right? So they just wait until somebody comes along and they almost like Velcro onto you. But that's what they do, quest. The Lone Star tick, however, is actually a tick that will travel. So it's going to take the initiative and go find a blood meal, not wait for a blood meal to walk by. So these are actually a tick that can be of concern in the lower portion of New York State. There's another reason too, and we'll get to that when we get to diseases. The Asian longhorn tick. So I debated on whether putting this into the slideshow, because this isn't a tick that we as humans need to be looking out for, in the fact that they take a blood meal from us. Generally, they're only wanting to take blood meals from cattle. But they can carry other various diseases, and by then carrying that disease, giving it to the cattle, the other ticks can then take a blood meal from the cattle, and it can get to us. So the other thing that's of note for the Asian longhorn tick, and this is an invasive tick, is that they reproduce parthenogenically, which means they don't need a mate. They don't need a male. So we need to worry about them, not in the same kind of way we need to worry about those black-legged ticks or the American dog tick or the brown tick or the Lone Star tick. So what do I need to remember about ticks? You want to put this in your head, 2, 3, 4. So they have a 2-year life cycle from egg to adult. They take 3 blood meals. That's what that hosts means, 3 hosts, and the 4 life stages. So this is Exodes, or the black-legged tick. It is just a diagram showing that 4 stages. So egg being 1, larva being 2, nymph being 3, and then that 4th stage as an adult. And so the eggs are laid by an adult, you know, anytime from spring through now. They hatch late spring, early summer. Those are then larvae. So remember, they have the 6 legs. Larvae are super, super small. So they're not going to be taking that first blood meal from something that's large. So they're not taking the blood meal from us. They are taking that blood meal from a white-footed mouse, a bird, something small that is on the ground, most likely where the eggs were laid. So the larva is then taking that first blood meal, it molts. And when it molts, it becomes this nymph. Remember, that's the poppy seed, right? So as the poppy seed, this is actually a time where they can get on us and take a blood meal. So it's possible that a nymph could have Lyme, anaplasmosis, babiosis, and transmit it to human. And again, these are really, really hard to see. It takes that blood meal, it molts again, becomes an adult. That adult then takes a blood meal, and that is another time in which we can be exposed to any of those tick-borne diseases. So what are those tick-borne diseases? It depends upon the tick. Some ticks don't carry some of the tick-borne diseases, others do. So for the black-legged tick, we're really focused on that Lyme disease, Powassan virus, anaplasmosis, babiosis, and they also do carry Bartonella. We don't really see that much in New York State. The American dog tick remember that's the more common of the two dog ticks. Carries Rocky Mountain spotted fever, Powassan, and tularemia. Brown dog tick, spotted, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, and then canine babiosis and ehrlichiosis. And then Lone Star tick. Remember I said we were going to come back to that. The Lone Star tick carries tularemia and ehrlichiosis, but it also carries something called alpha-gal, or it produces something called alpha-gal or tick-associated meat allergy. So that's not a particular bacteria or parasite that the tick is carrying, but it's how our bodies react to the saliva and the bite of that Lone Star tick. And that's important because that's a meat allergy. So then you have an allergic reaction to red meat. And there's not a lot known as far as like how that stays with us. Do you wind up being allergic to red meat for the rest of your life? Is it for a certain period of time? That's not well known. So I have a couple of slides throughout here that are from our St. Lawrence County Department of Public Health. This is one of them. So just some of those, common diseases that are in the tick population. And then what are we looking for when we're thinking about tick-borne disease? A lot of it is flu related, right? So you could think you have the flu. It could wind up being a tick-borne disease, or some of the symptoms from COVID-19 too. So fever and chills, aches and pains, and this can be like ache and pain in a joint, and it can like travel, right? So you might have it in your, let's say, elbow one day, ankle the next. That's really a key, right? Is if you don't have arthritis in those joints, and all of a sudden you're having that reaction, then this is something you need to see a health professional about. And then that bullseye rash, that only occurs in about 30% of cases of Lyme disease, but it definitely can be one of those key indicators. Some of the other diseases have rashes that are more generally in other locations in your body. So this is data from our Department of Public Health, our St. Lawrence County Department of Public Health. And it's looking at from 2015 till now, so 2025. And we can see really clearly, right, these increases in Lyme disease and this increase in anaplasmosis. And just as a, so we know the babiosis is actually a parasite, and treatment is a combo anti-parasitic and an antibiotic. And then the other three are bacteria, and they're generally treated with doxycycline. And I'm sure you all probably have questions, and we will come back to slides as needed at the end. Of note, in the 2025 data, this 146 number, it was 9 in July for anaplasmosis. So there were 9 cases of anaplasmosis in July, and as of October, we now have 146. So this is the time of year, right, in which we really need to be paying attention. So we think, oh, it's cold outside, it's rainy today, right? Like, how often do I need to worry about ticks? I'm going to skip this and come back just for a second because I want to talk about this and then we'll come backwards, but where we can expect ticks, right? Pretty much anywhere now. They are even on short grass if it's not out in the direct sun, right? They will be, they could be on short grass. this is not to say that you should not go outside. You should definitely go outside. But I'm gonna tell you how you can do it safely though. So a few things, you know, we're looking at shady, moist areas, areas where woods meet grass, any tall grass, those are areas that we need to be concerned of when we're walking. So we really want to stay on paths. We want to dress for prevention. So wearing light colored clothing, so we can actually see those tiny poppy seed or sesame seeds on our clothing. You know, tying hair back if we have long hair, wearing closed-toed shoes, long pants, tucking your pants into your socks. And then, you know, making sure that we treat either our clothing or ourselves when we are going out into locations where we know ticks are. So I have a garden. I'm here in the village of Canton. I have a garden and my garden is blocked off from having deer get in. But sometimes bunnies get in, right? And definitely through my fence, a white-footed mouse could get through. And I have a garden garage right beside that. So the mice definitely are in the garage, right? So when I am gardening, I'm making sure that I'm wearing clothing that I have treated with permethrin. So this is an insecticide. And you always want to follow labels on insecticides. But permethrin comes in a bottle. You treat your clothes. You do not spray permethrin on yourself. Again, you're following all of the labels. You wanna, when you apply this, wear gloves and follow the instructions. But this lasts for anywhere from 6 to 8 washes. So you want your clothes to be clean, treat the clothes, let them fully dry, and then you can use them out in your garden. Another item you could use is Picardin. And Picardin is actually, you can use that on your skin. But you can also treat your clothing. This depends upon the label as to how many washes you can get out of the Picardin. Just as a caution, the permethrin, you want to make sure when it's wet, you don't have cats near it anywhere because it's a neurotoxin wet for them. Picardin is safe for our pets. Not that you want to spray them, but. And then if you're not treating your clothes, you want to treat yourself. So you want to actually spray something so that you are making sure that you are safe out in the woods. The percentage doesn't make the DEET, and that's usually what we are talking about when we're spraying for ticks. The percentage doesn't make it longer lasting. That really depends upon each of the brands, and it should tell you on the label. I do have a QR code there for folks if they would like to go to the EPA website, where you can actually go through and look at all the various different types of repellents and whether one might be better for you than another. So I've done all the things I can as far as prevention. I'm now, I've found a tick. What do I do? Right? So now I'm gonna back up. And I found a tick, it's on my skin. So we have a tick right here on our piece of felt skin with Velcro. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a pair of tweezers, and you want sharp tweezers, right? Pointy, sharp tweezers. You are going to get fully underneath those mouth parts, so it's gonna be right against your skin, those tweezers, right? So I'm kind of almost pinching my skin. So I'm getting underneath those mouth parts. And I pull straight up. So I'm gonna pull straight up from my skin and hopefully get those mouth parts out. And it's important that you're not twisting or you're not going sideways, right? Because either of those ways has a potential to allow that tick head to remain inside your skin. I have a tick key, so it's on my keychain for work. And it works by going over the tick and lining up those mouth parts right in that very point of the tick key itself. Once you have that tick in that little point, you're gonna turn the tick key perpendicular to your skin and then pull straight out. Okay? Do not use tick twisters, tick tornadoes, any of those products, because that's twisting. And again, the likelihood that you'll twist and leave the head in your skin is pretty high. What you don't want to do, you don't want to use nail polish remover, matches, petroleum jelly, ice cubes, or food. Those don't work. And then where ticks commonly are, so we want to check our whole body, but you know, around your hairline, behind your ears, under your arms, at your belly button. So especially if you don't tuck your shirt in, right? Ticks will crawl right up, find that belly button waist area, between your legs, behind your knees, and then if you don't tuck in socks, in pants into the socks, that line, really wherever your socks are. And you know, we have to do tick checks on our pets when they're out in the woods with us too. Because even though they might have tick, flea and tick medication, they could bring those ticks into our house. Right, and then transmit it to us. So we want to make sure we're checking our pets as well. So ears, muzzle, under collar, between legs, front and back, toes. Can't tell you how many times I've found ticks between my dog's toes and around the tail. So no fear, we do have something we can do to when we get outside to feel a little safer, but we also can make something to put in our yard to make us feel a little safer. And that is tick control tubes or tick tubes. We can spray that permethrin on either dryer lint or, you know, cotton balls. We can put them inside a toilet paper roll, or if you have leftover sections of PVC pipe that's big enough, you can stick that in, because what'll happen is that white-footed mouse, because remember, we're back to the white-footed mouse is where we're getting that Lyme disease. The white-footed mouse will take that material and use it for nesting. And then it's almost like you have treated the white-footed mouse. So now you're interrupting that vector. So I'm going to bring us back to this slide before we head into talking about some climate change. And that's because if we're thinking about our changing climate, we're thinking about, you know, what do springs, summers, and falls, what are they like? You know, how long does fall last now? Right? How short is winter? How much less cold is? All of those impact our population levels of ticks. And it's common that people will say, oh, well, but if we have a really cold winter, it'll kill off the ticks. The ticks are really, really, really good at surviving, and there might be some portion of the population that doesn't make it through winter. but our winters are not harsh enough to kill large populations of ticks. So this is one of our, pieces of or documents that we have here at the center, really talking about weather and driving this unusual October warmth, right? On that same page, there's also a map with, dry conditions prompt state burn ban. And this is important for ticks because they don't like dry, super dry, and they don't like super wet. They like moist, but not super wet. So in conditions like this, we might expect that ticks would be a little bit less prevalent. But again, those numbers don't pan out for this year. So these next slides are from Dr. Kurt Steger, at Paul Smith's. He has a fairly recent publication in PLOS Climate from September 21st of 2022. That's a QR code, so you can link onto that and read it. It's available online. The once and future changes in climate and phenology within the Adirondack uplands. And that graph, right, that chart we had at the beginning, this is one of the charts from his article. And here in the North Country, we really are warming faster than globally. Those numbers are panning out. The stars in this particular map on the right are actually weather stations where Kurt got the information that's in this graph and the next few slides. The upper right hand star is Dannemora. That middle star is Tupper Lake. The lower star is Indian Lake. This is also from that research, a map showing various locations. So, the Indian Lake, the Tupper Lake, and the Dannemora station, but also gathering information at the Adirondack Ecological Center in Newcomb, which is that number 2, or number 4, which is Lake Clear, or number 7, which is Lake Champlain. And then the map on the right-hand side is a map of Paul Smith's College itself. And they set up a phenology trail to keep track of various wildlife. So redwings, red maples, so wildlife and plants, robins, plankton, pussy willows, bees, trillium trout lily, chipmunks, and salamanders. We'll come back to that. These are important because phenology is when do these things appear in our season. This is a picture of upper St. Regis Lake. This is Pete Conville's data that he kept on his shed of when ice came in on upper St. Regis Lake and when ice left upper St. Regis Lake. So this is one of those kind of ways that we can tell that our climate is in fact changing, we're warming, right? Is that we keep track of these dates of when ice comes in and when ice goes out. And so Kurt got this data for lower St. Regis Lake from 1970 until 2024. where they had ice out contests and they would monitor, right, when the ice would leave the lake. And, you know, through that time frame, we can see this downward slope, right? So we're seeing that the lake is thawing earlier in the year. And the ice not developing until later, and then also thawing earlier, can mean that some of our bodies of water, like Lake Champlain, are actually experiencing lots more periods of not even freezing in the main basin. Right, so you can see we've got a lot of asterisks going on as we're coming closer in time to our present. So it's not only ice on our lakes, right? It's also snowfall. So our snowfall, this is an old forge. This is a contest they would run every year to see how much snow they are getting in Old Forge. And this data from this contest, right, tells us that since the 70s, snowfall has been decreasing in Old Forge. And so we can actually see this chart on the bottom here. This upper portion is the Adirondack winter temperature, and we can see that increase, right? Like from that first slide. And we can see down below this Old Forge snowfall, the snowfall decreasing as we come closer to our present time. And then we can think about popular events in our North Country, right? So we think of Winter Carnival and the Ice Palace. And I remember going to the Ice Palace, to Winter Carnival, and seeing the Ice Palace in 2023 and just thinking, wow, this ice is, you know, it didn't make it. And, you know, Kurt has here this 1959 photo where you see those nice thick blocks of ice. And that's a problem for our continued carnival, right? And because part of our identity of the North Country is our connection to winter. And so just taking the data and projecting it out. Deep cold that is enough to create the ice on Lake Flower so that we can have an ice palace could be absolutely gone by 2080, right? In our changing climate. And so then we come back to that phenology trail because it's important as we have warming in our climate to realize that some things are now not going to line up. And so that V1 column, that is a moderate fossil fuel emissions scenario, right? That A2 is a extreme fossil fuel scenario. We're kind of in that extreme fossil fuel scenario still. But if we're looking at between 2020 and 2100, right? This is the days difference when things come out. So if we're looking at chipmunks here, right? The moderate is 8.4, the extreme is 19.7. But what are the chipmunks going to eat? Because those trout lily shoots and the trillium shoots are now misaligned, right? From these creatures that are used to coming out at certain times, right? That's that phenology. And it's even more dire if we look at the bees. So we look at the bees and we look at that bloom now for the trout lily, right? And that aligns for those male bees, not the female bees. And then it really starts to misalign for the trillium and the bees. And one of the first things that bees can use as food is actually pussy willows, those catkins from pussy willows. And now it's even more extreme. Right? So that misalignment is a problem. It's a problem for a lot of species. Other species like ticks take advantage of it, right? They can increase their populations. They can increase where they're at. And that was just the arrow for the pussy willows. So I'm 2 minutes over of my 10 minutes, but questions. I'd love to hear questions. And I'll go back slides if people want me to go back slides.
Hasn't even zoomed. Asking.
I have a question.
Okay.
I've had 4 tick bites.
Yep.
For 2 of them, I went through a 10-day shot.
Course. Yep, of the doxycycline, probably. Yeah.
And 2 of them, they gave me 2 pills. That was it. Which they say that is the protocol now. If you had a tick that supposedly hasn't attached. But can you be sure that the tick didn't attach? And also, I don't think that it goes against everything I've ever learned about antibiotics. But you don't just take a couple of antibiotics and stop, and take a couple more and stop. You're supposed to take a full course of antibiotics and finish it. They've been telling that, since we were little.
Since you were, yep. So the strength of the doxycycline is what is, and when you take it, right? So if you know you have had a tick on you and it attached, and you get that off and you get the doxycycline right away. That's the 2 to 3 days. And that's, public health knows the timing there. If you have a rash, because there's usually timeframes in which things appear, right? So the first 3 to 7 days is where you might see that rash, for Lyme disease. That would mean that you would need the potentially shorter course 10-day. If you're having symptoms, you have no idea when you were bit. That's usually when you get to that 30-day regimen. So it's just a matter of because if we come back to this slide, right? We remember that these are bacteria. So those antibiotics are really, the doxycycline are really effective on these particular bacteria.
I guess that must be, I've never had Lyme disease.
You are very lucky, knock on some wood. Yeah, it's been bad. These numbers are also just confirmed through testing numbers. So, I mean, it could be that more than likely a whole lot of other people.
Is it true that, so I had a volunteer who had symptoms for quite some time that were undiagnosed, and a lot of them were similar to other things. Finally got a diagnosis of Lyme, but this was long past, that early window of being able to take medication. So I guess the question is like, how many people actually catch it in time to treat it, and or do you end up with a lifelong diagnosis of Lyme?
Yeah, so you are killing that bacteria, but your body has already been exposed to that. And so the impacts on your body may be permanent. And it really can depend upon, did you get exposed and then did you get exposed again? Did you get exposed to Lyme disease and then maybe you got exposed to one of the other diseases? Like it just is, there's many variables when it comes to tick-borne diseases, how they're interacting within your body.
And I've also heard, I don't know if this is true, but the reason that you want to remove the head of the tick is because it can regurgitate or, whatever bacteria it has is then staying anymore, so.
So it can, whatever disease is in its mouth parts and its head can still transmit into you. And each of these has various different lengths of time that it needs to be embedded in order to transmit that bacteria. But you want to get it as soon as possible.